Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how you doing? What we're going to talk about today is how we can avoid a food shortage. In just about every industry globally, we are still feeling the effects of the pandemic. Food shortages to supply chain disruptions and other frustrations, the world continues to grapple with these issues. And the global food supply is no different. Add in a war ravaging a region that was once called the breadbasket of Europe, and we have a challenging situation. Now, what is causing this food crisis? Well, as we navigate through 2023, the world continues to grapple with a food shortage of unprecedented proportions. The number of individuals facing acute food insecurity has surged to 345 million across 79 countries. And this crisis, fueled by conflict and climate shocks and the lingering effects of the pandemic, has been further exacerbated by geopolitical events such as the war in Ukraine. There is no question that droughts and flooding and extreme weather of all sorts are on the rise as well. From tourism like Venice flooding and sinking to wildfires raging across the west coast of the United States, the food industry is no different. Look no further than the two of the U.S. leading farm regions, the Midwestern Corn Belt and California Central Valley, to see the effects that are already being felt. In California, extreme drought conditions are making it nearly impossible for farmers to produce as much as they once did. And this region is one of our top producers of veggies and berries, nuts and dairy. So we could be in trouble if the problem is not rectified very soon. Now, in the Midwest, they are experiencing the opposite problem. Increasing floods and gully washers are stripping away the precious topsoil that is needed to produce the corn. And the region produces about 75% of the nation's corn supply. And since the Europeans first colonized there, it has already lost about 35% of its soil, or topsoil, really. And these problems are being experienced worldwide as this global crisis continues to develop and expand. And it's likely that some of the damage done cannot be corrected quickly, possibly leading to a global food shortage problems for years to come. So the next thing that also affects all of this are cyber attacks. You probably heard about last year's ransomware attack on JBS, which is the world's biggest meat packer. The company eventually paid the cyber criminals $11 million to get things back up and running, but that's hardly the end of that story. The food industry is now coming to terms with its vulnerability to cyber attacks, and the problem is that so much of our food supply comes from just a few companies, and many of them have not prioritized cybersecurity, leaving the entire supply chain vulnerable. Then we have labor shortages. The pandemic exposed many of these problems in our economy, and one of the most lasting seems to be a labor shortage. And the problem is far-reaching, affecting nearly every piece of the supply chain, from pickers to packers to transportation to retail to restaurants, and every corner of the business sector. And the jobs seeing the worst shortages seem to be those with less desirable working conditions, since farm labor is often dangerous and back-breaking work, and packing plants, they're not much better. it's no surprise that the labor shortage is causing problems for our food supply. So there's also another major factor that most fresh foods are perishable, meaning that any delay in transportation can lead to spoilage. Like take crates of meat, for example, or dairy, or fruits, or veggies that have been left sitting in a shipping container because there are not enough drivers to move them to their destination. In some cases, the food needed to remedy this situation has literally just been thrown away. So then we move on to another problem, and that is scarce packaging materials. So finally, a concern that most people really, are likely not even thinking about in the food industry is a shortage of packing supplies is causing further problems. And the labor shortages that impact foods are also causing problems for materials producers. You've got paper, you've got plastic, you've got glass, you've got other common materials used to package our favorite foods, are all currently in short supply. So without these supplies, packaging plants cannot operate the way that they're supposed to, and products don't make it onto the grocery store shelves. So which countries are suffering the most from the global food shortage? Well, you've got the Democratic Republic of Congo. The number of people facing severe hunger is about 26 million. Primary drivers of hunger are conflict and displacement. So here's some of the details, okay? The DRC, or Democratic Republic of Congo, is currently the world's largest hunger crisis. It is exacerbated by over 25 years of conflict and endemic poverty. 26 million people, which is equivalent to the population of Texas, are severely hungry, and over 5 million have been displaced from their homes. These people have faced challenge after challenge after challenge, ranging from climate shocks to pest infestations to Ebola outbreaks and the economic impacts of the pandemic. So the next country is Afghanistan. The number of people that are facing severe hunger is about 19.9 million. The primary driver of hunger is 4 decades of conflict. The withdrawal of international troops in August of 2021 led to the rapid collapse of the Afghan government, if you remember that, okay? Now, this combined with the takeover of the Taliban forces resulted in economic turmoil and widespread displacement. Currently, 19.9 million Afghans, nearly half of the population, are severely hungry, with 4 million children and women being severely malnourished. The third country is Yemen. There's about 17 million people facing severe hunger, and the driver of that is civil war. Yemen has been embroiled in a complex civil war for the past 8 years. Between 2021 and 2022, the number of Yemenis facing severe hunger has increased over 1 million, reaching a record high of 17 million. And many families are surviving on minimal diets as rising prices make nutritious food extremely unavoidable. So the next country is Syria. There's about 12 million people that are facing severe hunger, and the primary driver of this is civil war. After 12 years of conflict, over 12 million Syrians are hungry. Nearly 13 million have been displaced from their homes, and the Syrian economy has suffered. And the value of the Syrian pound has declined as well, further exacerbating the impacts of the pandemic. So the next one is the Sahel, Sahel. And it's been projected about 13 million people are facing severe hunger. And the primary driver of this is armed conflict and climate extremes. The Sahel region, located just below the Saharan desert, is experiencing one of the most severe hunger crises. Approximately 13 million people just across 5 countries, which is Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, and that's Mali, not Mali, but Mali. I know sometimes my accent gets in the way. Mauritania and Niger are projected to face crisis levels of hunger, and this situation is worsening due to the spread of conflict, rising food prices, poverty rates, and frequent and extreme climate shocks. So now let's talk about which foods are in extreme shortages right now. Well, in today's market, there are several items that you may even have finding troubles finding at your local stores. And there are also smaller regional shortages due to breakdowns in transportation. If you watch the news or even have a little one at home, okay, you've probably heard about the baby formula shortage. Remember that? The crazy baby formula shortage, and everybody was trying to make their own baby formula at home and stuff like that. And then there was the huge recall, and then we found all the baby formula at the southern border and blah, 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 and that whole hoopla. Remember that? Well, then you've got some pet foods too that are in short supply today. Do you get your pet food from Chewy like I do? I'm constantly running into out of stock, out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. And I'm like, all right, this is just simple dog food, cat food, man. It's not like I'm ordering specialty nothing here, you know. Aluminum can shortages are wreaking havoc on the industry of pet food packaging, and it's taking a backseat to human foods that are in need of the same materials here. Bare shelves are becoming a serious problem for pet owners whose cats and dogs that are very picky to eat different brands, who have medical issues requiring a specific type of food. So what are stores actually running short on? Well, you've got bread, you've got cooking oil, rice, wheat, corn, baby formula, eggs, beef, sugar, canned pet food, and food deserts, okay? So let's talk about those food deserts. While we attempt to cope with temporary shortages in various areas, because I know you're probably sitting there going, I don't see any shortages. Like I said, various areas. There are some places with fresh food that's always in storage, you know, and there's some that are always in shortage. These food deserts, they have been labeled areas where the population does not have adequate access to fresh, healthy food. Typically, residents live on a diet like fast food and other unhealthy options. Now, while this may seem like a third world problem, it's a first world problem too. It's actually a significant issue right here in the United States. In fact, the USDA maintains a food access research atlas. And this details the areas where fresh food options are few and far between. And this atlas correlates low income and low access and shows areas where these two factors combine to form food deserts. If you look at the map, you might be surprised to see just how much of our country actually lacks access to fresh, healthy food. So while these shortages that we're seeing now makes a life difficult for many, they may be only the beginning. Global food shortages are actually coming, and we need to be prepared. I mean, that's why we live the lifestyle that we live. Am I right or am I wrong? I mean, we're likely to see more empty grocery store shelves, more food inflation by the end of this year. The UN predicts that cereal and corn will be running out starting next year. Imported goods, particularly those coming from China, Eastern Europe, will likely to continue to see supply chain problems. As bad as things may get here, we're unlikely to see the worst of the problems. Other nations are experiencing food crises and will probably continue to do so for the next year or maybe even longer. The World Bank is working on responses, as are several other humanitarian organizations, but it's unlikely that they will be able to alleviate the supply chain problems completely. Part of the issue is that many countries have been experiencing food insecurity for years, and the pandemic has just exacerbated that plight. So, it's always good to be prepared in case of an emergency, right? I think we can all agree on that. But stockpiling is not the same as hoarding. I'm going to say that again. Stockpiling is not the same as hoarding. I cannot stand when someone sees that you are stockpiling food, they think that you are a hoarder. Stop right there. There's a big flip-flop in difference, all right? In general, it's a good idea to have your emergency food supply that includes like several days worth of non-perishables. But while you are going to build up your stockpile of food, be reasonable in the amount that you're purchasing and that you're storing. Hoarding too much food can cause further problems in the food supply chain, of course. We saw that with the toilet paper debacle, right? Now, here's a list that I'm going to give you of some foods that you could consider stocking up on to ensure that you've always got options in your pantry in the event of a food emergency. So let's start with bottled water, shelf-stable fruits and veg, beans and lentils, rice, nuts, peanut butter, shelf-stable milk like powdered milk or even canned milk, okay? Shelf-stable meat options, healthy oils, food for your infants and your young children, food for your pets. So in the face of an impending crisis, it is vital that we each behave responsibly to keep from worsening this situation. But what does that mean in light of a global food shortage? First, do not panic. All right, panic buying leads to hoarding, and as discussed with the toilet paper, that's not good for anybody anyway. Instead, only purchase what you need, what your family needs, what you will reasonably use. Remember the saying, only buy what you eat, only stock what you eat, all right? Next, look for sustainable alternatives to your favorite foods and shop locally if it's possible. And this way, you'll avoid the problems related to transportation of food. Finally, try to purchase goods that use minimal packaging. Cut back on the single-use plastics. Look for refillable, reusable alternatives. So, amidst all these challenges, sustainable farming methods. I love my hydroponics, okay? There's also something called vertical farming that has emerged, and it's looked at as like a beacon of hope. I only wish I had the room to do it. While it may be too late to preempt the current food shortage concerns completely, we should be working towards a more sustainable future. Sustainable local foods are an excellent way to solve many of the problems that threaten our food supply. So that's why, or where we should actually focus our efforts. Plan your survival garden. Grow indoors year-round if you can. Buy your grow lights. Extend your growing season. If you have a garden, but you can only grow food in the spring and the summer, look into techniques that let you extend your growing season even further. Start to learn how to preserve your food. Even if you don't grow your own food, you can still learn to water bath can, pressure can, ferment, dehydrate, freeze dry, etc. In the summer, when the farmers markets are full of cheaper seasonal produce, you can buy as much as possible and then preserve the foods yourself. There are online chicken groups. It's hard to explain, that are full of irresponsible suburban backyard flock keepers who do not properly handle their excess roosters. I have regularly read posts from people that are begging others to take their pet roosters and give them homes, pet homes only, with a rehoming fee, of course. Go and get them. You know what I mean? Honestly, it's free food. Look at it that way. Buy whole animals. A whole cow, a pig, a lamb costs significantly less than its parts individually purchased at a butcher shop. If you have a chest freezer, you can fit a lot into it, and buying whole animals will save you significant money, especially if you want grass-fed or pastured meat. You can also buy primal cuts and do the butchering yourself. Use the food bank. If you need it, use the food bank. Use whatever other social assistance programs are available to you. There's no shame in that, okay? You've paid your taxes all your life for just this moment when you actually need to make use of these programs, and the government will waste it anyways. You might as well take some back. There's no shame in it. There is never shame in needing any help. Learn fishing, hunting, foraging. I'm not even going to pretend that these are easy or cheap to get into. Foraging and fishing are likely the most accessible depending on where you live. Okay? All right, guys. I'm out of here. I will see you in the next one, okay? You stay safe. You stay positive. You keep prepping. And as always, fear less. Ciao.